Okay. Good evening and welcome to the special council meeting for Wednesday, March 27th. We are beginning at 6:02 p.m. At this time, I'd like to confirm the agenda. Are there any emergent items from any of the councillors to possibly be added to tonight's agenda? Seeing and hearing none, then I'm looking for a motion to confirm as presented. Councillor Wegener.
I move that council adopt the March 27th, 2024 special council meeting agenda as presented.
Thank you. You've all heard the motion. All in favor? And the motion is carried. We move to our only item of business tonight, 3.1, Wheatland Housing Management Body Request for Design Funding. Mr. Scoble, our CAO, will speak first.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So a follow-up to the March 14th Wheatland Housing Management Body project update. There was a request last week from the housing body to fund the design work component of the project. So with the calling of the special meeting, administration prepared the report before you this evening. Try and summarize it quickly here. I mean, it does meet three of council's strategic goals: affordable housing, community wellness, and financial sustainability. Talking a bit about our current financial status. So, of course, council's prioritized financial stability in its strategic plan, which includes maintaining sufficient reserves with the reserve policy you've developed. So during the March 20th, 2024 regular council meeting, council approved the transfer of $1.587 million from the 2023 accumulated surplus to reserves. So this results in a 2023 year-end balance of $13,995,733. And this year, with some transfers to and from the reserve, our projected year-end balance of our reserves is, $9.276 million. Before consideration of this funding request before you this evening. On the policy side, of course, on April 5th, 2023, Council passed a resolution regarding funding for the development for the 120-unit Wheatland Lodge, and the resolution read as follows: that Council direct administration to obtain a minimum of 2, preferably 3, updated appraisals on the 4.7 acres of undeveloped property east of Kinsman Lake that was donated to the housing body, conditional upon the construction of the new Wheatland Lodge seniors facilities, with funding coming from the Financial Stabilization Reserve. And that council commit to the development of a new 120-unit Wheatland Lodge contingent on the capital requisition not exceeding $566,625, excepting for any increases resulting from a lower average value of the land appraisals than the current estimated land value of $1.4 million. All parties agreeing on the valuation of the land being donated by the town, the operating requisition not increasing more than the Calgary CPI index year over year, WHMB lobbying the province for support and resources for the proposed development, WHMB receiving the province partnership program grant in the amount of $7.14 million, and the proposed development receiving full regional support in the amounts provided for in the one-time capital requisition. And that the mayor and that council authorized the mayor to sign the attached letters to Canada Housing and Mortgage Corporation and the government of Alberta regarding development of the 120 unit lodge. So should council approve this request tonight, administration will transfer $463,389 to WHMB with funds coming from the Financial Stabilization Fund, contingent on all other funding partners authorizing payment of the proportionate share of the design work. The WHMB request is not for monies additional to the initial project budget. It is a request for a portion of the initial project budget to complete design work such that the project is shovel-ready prior to the province's Affordable Housing Partnership Program intake for capital funding requests in the fall of 2024. So per the April 5th, 2023 motion that I referenced, the $463,389 currently requested would be within the capital requisition of $566,625, variance on which is only subject to the valuation of the town-owned lands to be donated as the proposed lodge site as part of the town's contribution. So again, we provided some background for you in the report here. Typically, the province either requires or more highly prioritizes shovel-ready projects. And that's our understanding of the WHMB's request tonight, is to take that to that shovel-ready to improve the prioritization by the province in awarding the monies. I think I've covered most of it there. We've put some of the key history in there of past resolutions on the land and that, but with that, we'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you. And just before I ask for questions, I just want to remind the people at home, maybe the media who are covering this tonight, that this amount, this ask tonight is strictly, as a repeat, it's part of the $566,625 we approved last year, contingent upon other things. So it is not extra money that Wheatland Housing Management Board is asking now. It's all part of the amount that we committed to in April of 2023. And this is tonight's item is to get to the next design phase so that we can be ready for the next round of provincial approvals. So with that, I'll turn it to questions. Do we have questions for... Well, I think we can have questions first, can we not? As long as everyone sticks to questions, and if you want to make statements or discuss or debate, then we'll put a motion on the floor. So tonight, are there questions that people would like to have addressed? Okay, seeing here, oh, Councillor Montgomery.
Yeah, thank you. So these questions are open for anybody on council who I'm presuming will be making an informed decision and will have this information. So my first question is, in early 2023, I attended an information session at the Strathmore Library, and in early 2023, the projected cost was planned to be around $52 million with a 50-year amortization at 2.85%. Is the new figure, I was told that there's going to be a $100,000 surplus based on 100% occupancy of this new lodge. And so is that $100,000 surplus based on new figures, including an updated interest rate, or is it based on the figures we were presented in early last year?
Councillor Peterson?
So Glenn is probably, do you want to come to the mic, Glenn? Because you're probably more...
Actually, sorry, I just, this is, like I said, this is for members of council
yeah,
because
but if
somebody on council must know the answer to these in order for us to make an informed decision.
So Councillor Montgomery, I think the important thing is answering your question. Am I correct?
Well, so part of this, like, I'm not here to try to convince anybody tonight. It sounds like people have made up their minds. I'm open to different options, and that's why I put together a list of questions as I was prompted to do. I think it's important that we demonstrate that we have a strong command of knowledge regarding this project, and that we fully understand the implications of what we're getting into. And so having council members answer these, because I'll be honest, I'm ignorant to the answer to these questions, and so I'm unable personally to make an informed decision without these answers. So the first question, like I said, is are these figures that we're kind of using, are they based on current figures and updated figures, or are they based on figures from early 2023 at this time?
Well, I believe there have been many opportunities to have questions asked. We've had various reports from our councillors who sit on the board. We've had numerous open houses. We had a March 14th open house with the expert who's been working with Wheatland Housing Management Board. And to be honest, Councillor, you never asked any questions that night.
Yeah, so I'm the type of person that I like to kind of reflect on things, sure, and then I come up with questions. And I was prompted after that meeting to come up with questions. And
well,
so
is your motivation to get answers strictly from councillors, or are you trying to put anyone on the spot by asking it only of councillors? We have the chairperson from Wheatland Housing Management Board here that can answer some of your questions. So if you're truly going for the most absolute, honest, up-to-date information, why wouldn't you take it from someone who who has that information. But if you're trying to put us on the spot, which is what it feels like to me, I don't plan on joining in on that.
I'm just demonstrating that it's my impression that council actually is not informed enough to make this decision, and so that's why I'm asking members
That's
of
not a
council.
question that you're stating right now. You're stating an opinion of us.
Right, yeah.
We
that's-
know
that's my
quite a
opinion.
bit about the laws, but I don't think that any of the council have to demonstrate their knowledge of something to you.
No, they'll be demonstrating it this is for the members of the public.
Well,
who
we
are
have a
watching.
person who's willing and able to make that presentation or answer some of your questions. So if you're worried about what the public,
We have two members
I wasn't
of,
finished.
well, I'm talking.
I was just finishing my sentence.
Yeah.
So if you would like correct answers and you're worried about what the public might hear, why wouldn't you take a response from someone who's in the absolute most important part of all the planning? He's been there right from the start.
I've got two members of the Wheatland Housing Management Body sitting next to me right now who should have these answers, given that they are proponents of this project. And I assume anybody that will vote for this should know these answers as well. And I can ask, I guess, the chairperson, I guess, at the end of this.
Your Worship, I think that, Councillor Montgomery did submit questions yesterday. Councillor Wagner and I did send him an answer to those questions, and some of those questions referred him to the same presentations that he watched. He was at the presentation in Strathmore in September of 2023. He had access to the presentation that the consultants did last fall at the prior to the votes that all of our municipalities took. Those for me to answer questions in the way you phrase them are difficult because they are fraught with misinformation, the questions themselves, but by referring you back to the experts that presented the information on those really, really fulsome presentations, I think is the best possible way for me to answer the question. But from a very generic perspective, we've always tried to ensure that the lodge build was within that $50 million. The debt servicing has not appreciably changed from all of the presentations that you heard, the same as I did. You have actually sat on Wheatland Lodge as a backup, and I've sat. We've been dealing with this lodge and hospice build for at least 7 years, most of which that time you've been on council. And so you've had access to exactly the same amount of information that Councillor Wagner and I have. And so I know that you have said consistently that you don't understand. And I have struggled and need, I guess, help for why you can't understand, because we have presented these fulsome, huge amounts of information over long periods of time and broken them down into fairly succinct charts and diagrams and presented them to council on a very, very regular basis. And so I would need you to help me understand why you think that this council doesn't understand.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, as you mentioned, I'm actually fairly informed about the what got us to this point, and there's been many different iterations and ideas for what the lodge could look like, including formulations that had extended care and whatnot. So we're actually looking at basically an iteration that was presented to us about a year ago. And so what I'm asking is, in the past year, since interest rates have gone up quite a bit, and there's been changes in other factors that affect construction, I have questions about whether. So my question is fairly simple. It's are we using figures from today when we are calculating the various aspects of this project, or are we using the figures that were put out last year at this time?
Councillor Wegener.
So with the figures, we have our building committee that has been intimately involved with this, dealing with M3, dealing with Bird Construction, dealing with Derek Weiss and Barry Architect. And the figures that they have presented us are the most up-to-date figures that that we have. And again, things are going to change. Interest rates are going to change. Building material prices are going to go up or go down. This is kind of an unfair question because things do change. So the information that we have as of the last Wheatland Housing Management Body meeting, where the building committee presented, are the most up-to-date figures that we have.
And it did, if I might add, Your Worship, interest rates did go up, and so there was an increase. So the interest rates hit, I think it was 2.8, and so 2.5. So there was an increase in the overall costs. But the job of the building committee, or the task of the building committee, has always been to try to keep that amount within that $50 million range. But it has been a moving target because of challenges within, that everybody is aware of what the challenges are. And so they've tried very, very hard to adapt, to keep it within that. But there was a 2.5% increase over time, and that will increase that $50 million mark. And it does impact it. I mean, that is just the math, but it's not something that hasn't been presented. And so when we speak about working off of numbers, we're working off of what we have in the current moment, but we also recognize that there's a moving target.
Yeah, so yeah, I'm not trying to hold you guys to like something that's going to happen in the future. I'm just asking, so when I hear that there's going to be a $100,000 surplus based on 100% occupancy, I just wanted to know if that was based on updated financial information, or if it was. And so it sounds like it's based on updated. Well, actually, so I'll ask just, and this is for public consumption. I'm asking this, for the public as well, so I can make an informed decision. But this is, so that the public has, kind of a good idea, because they don't get to sit through all the meetings that we do and attend the presentations that we do. So the $100,000 surplus that was mentioned is based on like today's interest rates, today's build cost, and whatnot?
Well, we don't really, I think it would be very difficult to outline, specific build costs. Because when we start to build, there'll be capital costs. And, we have hired a construction manager, but until we actually send things out for tender, I don't think we'll know. So our construction manager, having that person in place, gives us that baseline so that we'll be able to know what we should be looking at, but we also know that there's some variations within that line. And I guess it depends, and there's all kinds of dependencies. It depends on how much of the overall cost is paid for upfront by the municipalities. That will impact. There's many, many things. But in terms of, the 50 to now 2.5% plus 50 million on the building, the $700,000 a year in debt servicing, the number of rooms that the build is accommodating, the contribution of the hospice to the capital project, all of those things have stayed within a very, very sound parameter.
Yeah, and like that information that you're discussing right now would actually be amazingly helpful in a document that could be reviewed, that so I could kind of.
But there was a document, respectfully, Councillor, all of these numbers have come out in the documents. They're in graphs that were presented in the consultant's presentation, and in the last one that he gave us, all of those numbers.
The other question I'm wondering about too is, again, in April of last year, we approved the amount that's in our agenda, and this $463,389 is a part of the amount we approved last year. So it's not extra money on top of what we approved, it's part of the money we approved.
That motion died because
The motion died?
the contingencies weren't met. So that motion is basically null at this point. So we are being asked to present or to provide fresh, basically money that is not allocated at this time, which is
CAO Scoble, can you speak to whether or not the contingency items have failed?
I guess I would have to understand specifically what bullets in that motion have failed or have not been met.
Yeah, I can find it out. Excuse me.
Well, Councillor Montgomery's looking for the numbers. One of the things too that I should say, you know, when our costs have gone up in terms of 2%, you know, on that 50 million, is that the building committee has continued to commit to bringing that back down. They're working very, very hard to do that. And when I've seen how they've been able to adapt the building costs throughout the process, when the delays have lent to huge increases, right, through what we all know of in terms of being able to access materials and the costs, they are still trying very, very hard to bring that back into line.
So did the WHMB receive the Province Partnership Program grant?
So are you talking about the $7 million?
Yeah,
So that won't happen until we do our part.
but it was applied for, right?
It will be, yes.
But
it
it
will-
wasn't applied, sorry, but I'm reading the motion from a year ago, and it talks about that grant being applied for, and was it applied for?
Yes.
Well, it says Wheatland Housing Management Board receiving the grant. So they
Right,
haven't
right.
applied.
So
So
no,
there's
we
a
did.
difference.
We did. You know, we're in the lineup, right? But it's
No,
contingent
but the
on-
contingency says that
right.
the housing board
But we're not in
receives it,
violation.
but we're not at that
No,
point yet.
we're not in violation.
Okay. And so just to be clear, so that $100,000 surplus that that was one of the answers to my questions that I submitted, where did that $100,000 figure come from exactly?
I'll try and answer that. And again, if I'm not 100% on it, I'll ask Glenn Kester. That is based on figures that came from Derek Weiss based upon full occupancy of the lodge. There are different tier levels for funding for payments in that lodge. But everything, and then again, along with the hospice as well, but everything going according to plan, there should be approximately about $100,000 surplus, and that's on an annual basis, I believe. So again, it's numbers trying to hit that moving target, as Denise mentioned. It may be more, it may be less, but it's a estimation based on full occupancy of the lodge.
Thank you.
And again, that has been brought up at numerous public engagements and informational sessions too.
Yeah, so some of these questions are actually, I just want clarification about those information sessions. So for instance, it was mentioned at the last presentation that there is going to be an increase in requisitions as a result of the new lodge. So I'm just wondering if I'm misunderstanding something here. And not counting debt servicing, will there be an increase in what the town pays to Wheatland Housing Management Body as a result of the new lodge becoming operational?
Councillor Wegener?
Again, as from the way I understand it, there should not be an increase in requisitions, and that we are still planning on keeping the existing lodge of 80 or 90 beds for several years to come. The requisitions, as far as I understand, are not going to change. Is that a correct statement there, Councillor Kester? Close. But again, it's the requisitions that we're currently paying are based on the assessed tax value and equalized assessments. And at this this point, if anything, minimal.
Sorry, so, Mr. Kester, if you wouldn't mind, can you, sorry, what? Yeah, Councillor Kester. Would you mind just stating, like, I'm hearing that there won't be an increase in requisitions, but at the presentation, there was mention of some increase in requisitions. Would you comment on what that's, if there is going to be an increase, or what that is?
Could I ask a question of you, Councillor Montgomery?
Yep.
Does your need to know that impact on you voting to put in the money that we approved already?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's going to impact that.
Well, so, and this is something that I guess is kind of sticking in my craw, is that it sounds like, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like we're being asked to make a decision to fund a project. And this is where, like, you know, I was going to talk about fiduciary duty, but I'll save everyone that. But so if we all have our council hats on and we take off our seniors housing hats and we take off our support of the lodge hats, okay? And just for the public's knowledge, okay, I support seniors housing to the point where I actually, in my free time, my free personal time, go and look for other kind of, you know, options for seniors housing just to see what's out there. But so if we take off those hats and we put on our council hat, we have a group that has come to us and they're asking for almost $500,000, regardless of what it's for. And there's kind of possible effects afterwards as far as how much we could have to pay as ongoing costs. So I think it's very, very, very important, I'll stress that we know what we're getting into as, and that's, I guess, like I said, that's what kind of is sticking for me, is because you know, we're getting into a situation here, we're being asked to make a decision on something where we're not being painted a complete picture. There's like all these unknowns, including how much, and so I threw out this figure earlier today, and I want this to be corrected, please. I think that, you know, so our current requisition for the current lodge is around $305,000 for the town of Strathmore. And then there was mention of debt servicing, which could be around $294,000. And so, like, and then this is, like I said, you know, I want correction, please. So that puts us at about $599,000 that we might have to pay every year to the Wheatland Housing. And then on top of that, there's going to be, you know, possibly, but possibly not, an operational requisition that will be needed, which could be, I mean, like, you know, the current lodge for some reason, you know, needs $300,000 a year. So I don't know why a lodge with more beds would need, you know, less than that. But, and then on top of that, there's going to be the hospice, which our share of that could be $350,000. So we could be looking, you know, at rather than paying $300,000 a year as we are now, to paying $1 million or $1.3 million possibly. So, and that's what I was asking for. I want, you know, I'm asking for information so that I can make an informed decision, because according to my, you know, uninformed speculation, we're looking at about $1 million to $1.3 million per year in total yearly costs. And so that's what I'm concerned about. And so, yeah, so making a decision to, you know, give them, and the other question, anyways, yeah, so please, yeah, go ahead and.
So I don't know where you got your numbers.
I got them from the.
Yeah, well, so what I've said before and what I've said repeatedly, so our requisition this year from Wheatland Housing went down. It didn't go up, it went down, but there is a reserve as well. It has no impact on what we're talking about today. So if you're talking about the future lodge, what we know is that it's a $50 million cost, thereabouts.
I'm sorry, hold on.
Depending on how you amortize it over however many years, will depend on the ultimate cost. We know that the debt servicing on this building that we're here to discuss today is about $700,000 a year. That's $231,000 for Strathmore, and the rec of $145,000, you know, for operations. So none of those numbers have ever really changed. Today we're here to talk about paying that $1.4 million and our portion of that, which is $463,389. That was included in the initial $7 to $8 million that was always lined out for us at the front end. So none of that has changed.
Sorry, and I just want, like, I just want to calculate this as you go. So right now, according to administration, we're paying 305 in the year 2024. So that's-
I'd have to look at my,
Through the
CAO
chair,
Scoble?
maybe I can clarify. Council received an email, was it today? Council inquiry that was sent to all councilors from or council members yesterday? From Councilor Montgomery, who answered the question, and basically it was, I believe, 93,000 for reserves, which is a one-time thing, and it was about 206,000. I mean, maybe Kara can look up, but you all have that email. That's the number that Council Montgomery's using. So we don't have the actual requisition from the housing body yet. So we've estimated it based on last year's plus a bit of an increase for inflation and what have you, plus the 99,300 for reserves, which I'll let the
And CAO Scoble, correct me if I'm wrong, we aren't necessarily held to that amount for reserves. That's fluid. It can be negotiated.
I would defer to the board members.
Yeah.
I don't know, like, that's a one-time request as I understand, but.
yeah, if you want to come to the mic, Glenn, and the people.
Councillor Kester, sure, come on up to the microphone. We want to get the most accurate information.
There's a little red button to hit there. Oh, there you go, you're good.
Now it's red. I can tell you what your $99,297 for the reserve. The reserve is set by the board every year. We're looking at a failing roof, and we're hoping to build up the reserve, and we wouldn't have to hit you again with another amount if we can get through. So that's what and we have 200,000 or 300,000 in reserves now. So we almost, with this new reserve tally, almost, but you never know if the dishwashers last or the boilers. And your requisition for the deficit financing is 145,000. I think our operation deficit was $438,543. Strathmore's
Sorry,
share
could
would
you say
be,
that number one more time, please?
huh?
So, sorry,
It's in the mail. It was mailed last Friday. You should be getting it next time you get the mail delivered. So
When you say-
Strathmore's share is 145,154.
of which, sorry, that's under which category?
That is the deficit financing.
And that's for
The lodge.
the new lodge?
No, the
Okay, so,
existing lodge.
okay.
I
So,
think
the
he
way
doesn't,
it
I think he
works-
doesn't understand how it works.
Okay.
yeah,
Because
no,
there's
that's
that's
true.
the-
So like I
there's
said,
been a
that's why I'm
change.
trying to get to the bottom of this. so
It
I
has
can
nothing to
understand
do
all the
with what we're
numbers.
discussing tonight, but yeah.
So a few years ago, minister signed a bill and changed the way housing bodies collect requisitions, and it's deficit financing. So last meeting, board meeting of the lodge, we got the audited financial statement, and it told us exactly how much money we made or lost. So we take that money, that final number, and we subtract last year's requisition from it, and we get the debt. And that number is what we requisition for this year. And that, as I said, Strathmore's share is $145,154. That changes yearly. We used to make a budget and send the budget out and requisition on that budget, but that's a days gone by.
Sorry, I just want to make sure I'm caught up here. So when I hear that, for instance, we're sending 206 plus 99 for a capital reserve, and then you're
No,
saying...
you're
so
sending $99,297 to reserves.
CAO,
And-
sorry, Councillor Kester, CAO
Through
Scoble.
the chair, the 206,000 was our guess at the operating requisition. But according to Councillor Kester, because we don't have that information yet, I understand the letters in the mail, what he's saying is that it's 145,000. The requisition's actually gone down. Whereas we took last year's requisition conservatively and added to it because we didn't know what it was yet. So it was 206,000 plus the 99,300. So the 99,300 number for the reserve, we're both saying the same thing. And I'm saying now that my number is wrong. It was an estimation. Councillor Kester is providing the actual requisition.
And just with what Councillor Kester is saying too, it was much easier, because that's what every municipality did. They estimated it going forward, and it used to allow municipalities to build in that 3 and 5 year financial plan, being able to do it from a budgeted perspective. We no longer, after the Minister Sigurdsson, I think under the NDP government, changed that, and so now we operate on a deficit financing model.
So it kind of
Councillor
takes the
Kester.
model of the social housing budget. We run 2 budgets. Sorry,
Okay,
Honorable.
so that clears up for me, I guess, what we're paying currently. And then going forward, and you'll have to, I guess, educate me here. So will the town have, well, I guess, so, initially there's going to be money borrowed presumably by Wheatland Housing to build a new lodge. They'll be paying, obviously interest and principal on that. I guess, will the revenues from the new lodge cover all the operational costs plus that debt servicing, or will the town be on the hook for either operational costs and or debt servicing of the new lodge?
So you've asked a bunch of questions.
Yeah.
And if you permit me a few minutes, I'll explain how we got to this point today. A year and a half ago, after talking to the chairman of finance for housing up at Edmonton, the ADM, Linda Cuppins, she recommended that we approach Derek Weiss. She sent me his information. I contacted him. The board hired him. We told him what we wanted. He looked at, at the time, it was 165 beds. We were dreaming of SL3 and 4 maybe, and on and on. There were dreams. We had community presentations. So he says, that's about $90 million. The board says, that's too much money. So we put our hats on. We come up with 120 beds, straight lodge, keep the old lodge for 20 years, buy us 20 years at time, and at which time we'll have to replace the old lodge. So to come up with a price, they could go around and he's in the business of building lodges. So there's 3, 2, 3, 4, I don't know how many new lodges being built. They know how much it costs. They divide it by the square footage. They get a price per square foot. They look at ours at 120 beds at 950 square feet per room, and they come up with $53 million and change. So from there, he has a business, and his wife is an accountant, and they know what the grant schemes are. So they worked out one other important question. Before he worked it out, he asked the board, how much money do you have for a contribution? So the lodge board said 800,000, which we're pretty close to. We've got our contribution in. The municipalities said they wanted to put the least amount of contribution in that was allowable. That's not free money. Municipalities have to borrow and make up that money. So that's why there's a municipal requisition to pay. If the municipalities would have ponied all the money up their share, there would be no requisitions. The lodge would make enough money on its rent to pay for the operations and pay for the remaining money owed. But being that the municipal contribution was going to be $6.5 million. That wasn't a third of the build. So that had to be borrowed. So he put that in his contribution in his spreadsheet that he has, the contribution. He put in the land value at $1.4 million. He put in what the province said they would put in. He put in what the CMHC would put in, and he put in, inflated that, or they call it a test of 1.1% more on the lending rate, and that's where we get our surplus from. And he come up with the number of, and I got it here, these are from our presentations a year ago, the cost. And when I look at the cost on the page, it said the municipal annual requisition will be $700,000. That's payable yearly. And that was come by an average number multiplied by and what the province would put in. So on, what day was that? That was, I would miss that meeting too, March 14th. Derek come out, presented in here, and there's a recording of it, and watch it like I did. I got the most important slide here right in front of me. Now this slide is up to date, and this is what it says on there. It says tested the perform at 4.3%. The interest rate right now is maybe 3.3, so he tested it 4.3 to make sure we don't lose money, okay? We can get away with a 1% test because it's CMHC and it's supportive housing. If we go to a bank, he's saying it's closer to 1.6. So we're lucky there. CMHC has changed their program on dollars per door. And it also says here, the projected municipal contribution to support the debt remains at $700,000. It's still $700,000 with the cost increases. I know you're worried about this went up and that went up, but also the provincial contribution has gone up. And it's like, you have to look at the bottom number. So if this goes up without taking into account your income is going up, you're only getting a piece of the whole picture. So the contribution is still $700,000. So he has latitude in his thing. I don't know exactly what interest rate that is. I know it's changed. I don't know how many years it is. He had latitude. It started out at 50. At one time, it was maybe 25. So he has that latitude to keep it at 700,000 because that's what the municipalities agreed to a year ago on their letter of support was $700,000. And your share, I don't have it in front of me, but it's still the same. It has not changed.
Sorry, so the $700,000 you're saying would be when the new lodge is built, the town would have to pay their proportional share of $700,000 on an annual basis?
Currently, that's $231,693. And you're up. Right now, your share is 33.099%, and last year it was 32.53. So either the town picked up some more assets or the rest of the municipalities lost. I know county we lost some linear. So, but that number changes yearly. You have no control over it. It's done by the Alberta government, equalized assessment. You get a note in the mail, that's what it is. But it's holding steady at 700,000. It hasn't changed. The numbers that go in it are constantly floating and mixing, yeah.
Okay.
But the number is still the same.
Okay, and so I just want to be clear. So currently, the town is paying, yeah, 145,000, and then this year we'll have to contribute 99,000. And then so going forward, it will be the, 145, affected however that's going to be affected, plus our share of the 700,000. And then there could be operational costs possibly on top of that.
If it breaks the 1% we've built in, okay? When we done the pro forma, we done it at 3.3. That's what the interest rate is. We built it interest rate and put it 4.3. So we have to make enough money to pay an interest rate of 4.3. But the interest rate is only 3.3. So that 1% difference is the surplus. Does that make sense? So it's actually built into the budget. So to get that money, there's the income side. So we're going to have 3 levels of rooms. We're going to charge residents different rates for different rooms. The LAP grant was increased here a couple weeks ago. There was an announcement. So there'll be more seniors paying, with the help of the government, paying the full rate, right? And there was another grant per door has increased too. So taking all that into consideration, we should make $100,000. Plus, the first 10 years that nobody's talking about anymore, there's a forgiveness of, from CMHC, loan forgiveness of roughly $2.5 million. And that goes back after the mortgage is paid, they'll rebate us $2.5 million. So that's divided over 10 years, so it's $250,000 a year. Goes to the housing board. So the housing board could use this money to decrease the requisitions. They could build up the reserves faster because
Or we could pay down debt.
pay down debt, because the last roof that went on the lodge, we got a pretty nice grant from the government to put it on. There's no more grants. So you have to be responsible and build up your reserves to pay for a roof. So when you got a building of 120 beds, there's going to be ongoing maintenance, roofs, windows, painting. In 30 years, you don't know what you're going to come against. So hopefully there's enough money so you don't have to come back to the municipalities and say, whoops, we'll have the money there to pay it. And that's why the reserve thing on the lodge went up a little bit this year to catch up and get this roof paid for. We have other reserve money too, but that's more of an operating issue. We're not broke, that's by any means, but we're trying to be
Sorry, Councillor
responsible.
Kester, just an operational question. Claudette, do you still have Councillor Wiley with us? No, we don't have him?
So I hope that kind of straightens things out so you can look at the total picture.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to figure out like what our total annual, by the time we add in, the hospice, for instance, which I mean, like we're going to be on the hook for some proportional share of 800,000 possibly.
Our hospice chair is here if you.
Well, so
But
like
we're- I
what
don't know
I'm
if-
trying to get to the bottom of here, and my concern is what our actual obligation will be once this all goes forward. That's what my concern is, and that's what I'm asking for information for. You have shed a lot of light on these things, and so I appreciate that. Because yeah, it would be great to have, at least walking into this vote, it would have been great to have like, here's your total number of what the town's obligation will be, as an annual cost, because that's kind of my main concern. It's easy to kind of buy into a capital project, but my concern is the operational cost afterwards.
So, yeah, so it's 700,000 for the municipalities. It's supposed to be locked in for 10 years, I believe, with CMHC, at which time we can renegotiate. They're the cheapest game in town. I don't know what else I can tell you about the finances.
Yeah, no, like I said,
dependent on
that's actually
grants.
quite helpful, because as I mentioned to my fellow councilors over email, I'm quite, I was quite confused, because, you know, I'm getting different numbers, and I've been to the presentations. I've, you know, tried to make sense of, you know, as best I can, and that's why I put together these questions, was so that I could, you know, take all that information and boil it down to something that's, you know, kind of useful.
Yeah, when I was asked to, I thought in my own mind that it's confusing at the best of times, how I can kind of bring it and focus in. And I'm a bottom number type of guy. How much does it cost me? That's what I focused on.
Yeah.
And so that number is the same. Other numbers have changed,
Okay.
but that is still the same. So your obligation, if everything stays equal, is $231,000 a year. If your share of the total changes, then that changes too.
Do we have further questions for Councillor Kester or Councillors Peterson and Wegener?
Yeah, I do have more questions, actually. Thank you. Actually, so Councillor Kester, if you wouldn't mind telling me, so I seem to recall, like, about a year ago, roughly, there was a presentation saying that 10 of the units will be low income, is that right?
I don't have the percentages. There has to be 30%.
Allowability.
Yeah, so it has to be below market rental by a certain percentage. I don't have them numbers. And the most expensive units have to be 90% of market rent. And I think the cheapest ones are 60% of market rent. Don't quote me on that. But that's all in this total package that keeps it at $700,000. Those room numbers and values are done. So there will be different. In the lodge today, not everybody pays the same amount. Okay, some pay more for their rooms. A lot of it goes on line 150 of your tax return. There's a formula that the government has, they will figure out, and they will leave you with $285 in your pocket. And then the LAP grant comes along and puts some of that up if you qualify, and there's other minuscule grants too. But that percentage, it's affordable housing. That's why you get the CMHC loan at the conditions they have, because the federal government wants affordable housing. So I believe Alberta is, I think, the only province that has a lodge program like we have, is the only one in the country.
And the seniors benefit, we're the only province with the seniors.
And that ties into other multi-unit housing. We have one that's currently in the works, hopefully, that has to have a certain percentage to get CMHC funding, not for seniors, but for people who meet that threshold.
Families, right? It's the same pot of money we're competing for, but the CMHC is more guaranteed. The one from the Alberta government is the one we have to compete for. So the one that they haven't announced yet was supposed to be announced last Christmas, hasn't been announced yet, and it won't be announced until the budget is passed. When the budget's passed, you'll know who's getting the money. But they've said, Minister of Seniors, they've increased it tenfold for the next 3 years. They had a 10% more of an ask than they had. They had 50 million, they had an ask of 500 million. So they increased it by tenfold for the next 3 years to get these units built. So they're serious.
Can you speak to Councillor LaPrice's question at rural municipalities?
Okay. So last week, we had the RMA convention. And during the convention, we have what we call the bear pit. And 2 days, for close to an hour and a half, 2 hours, we have all the ministers come and sit in front of the assembly, and they'll take questions. About half the ministers one day and half the next. When Minister Nixon was there, Minister of Seniors and Community Services, Councillor LaPrice asked him the question, we've spent $1 million on planning for our new lodge. We're being asked to spend another 1.4 million, I think it was 1.6 million at the time of her question. And yet we have no guarantee we get a new lodge. Like, can't there be a better way of doing business? And the minister's answer was, he's only going to fund shovel-ready projects. We're not shovel-ready yet. We have to spend $1.4 million to get a shovel-ready project. It was originally 1.6. There was $200,000 they could take off. $200,000 was to cover building, some building permits, and $200,000. Oh, to do some site preparation work in case we could get to work. We could have got the foundation dug up and ready to go. And we're planning on doing concrete precast. So once we have the floor in, we can work whenever the weather's nice.
And Councillor Kester, these latest requisitions, as part of what councils have committed to, will put us at a shovel-ready position, correct?
Yeah, it'll take 1.4 to get us to shovel ready. And then it'll sit there because the next step is a bigger step and we have to go to tender. So we have to get documents ready for tender and lawyers, and that's more costly yet. So we don't get any money from our CMHC or the Alberta government until we actually get something built. So all the planning money is the upfront money that I talked about earlier, the $6.5 million.
And so that 1.4 million that we're coming up with our proportional share here, that is needed to complete the work. All that will be spent on getting us to shovel ready.
Yep. So originally, to apply to the Alberta government, we needed a Class C budget. And we sent that off to the province. That's what they got. The board kept working for about another 300,000. We got a Class B budget. And with that, we got just about enough to go to CMHC. So when we're approved by the Alberta government, we can go to CMHC. The 1.4 million will take us to construction ready, shovel ready, and they call it complete construction design drawings. Right now we have schematic. So these drawings, to get them, the housing body, we hired a project manager, M3. They've hired a construction manager, Bird Construction, and they've looked up and they've partnered up with Eagle Builders, they're precast. And through M3, we recontracted Barry Architecture for the architecting. And we hired Bird and them. And Turner Townsend is a third-party auditing service that go over the numbers that the construction manager gives us, or the project manager gives us, and audits them. And it's a verification process. And it's needed. The board didn't ask for that, but it's needed to get the grants. It's part of the way to verify that we're doing everything right. Every I's dot, every T's crossed.
Thank you.
It's part
Councillor
of doing
Montgomery,
business.
sorry, Councillor Kester, I want it for efficiency. Could you move on to your next question then?
Sure. Thank you. And yeah, thank you again for this information. Yeah, so I'll be honest, like one of my, I'm always looking for, I guess, the most efficient way to do things, as long as we're getting good quality. And so my questions, I like I said, I'm trying to, figure out the total cost to the municipality, because, and also the reason why I was asking about how many rooms are going to be, for instance, like low income, because, I want to ensure, I guess, that this is the best and most efficient way to provide subsidized housing to seniors. If we can, so for instance, I did ask, administration how much, an organization like, say, Sagewood pays in property taxes. And, like they're like, half the size of what this proposed lodge build is. And, in my mind, I'm saying, if a private builder came in and built a lodge, they'd be paying, they could be paying $400,000 a year in property taxes, to the municipality, and then operating on top of that without, taking a requisition. And, it seems to me that, if we're providing 10 rooms, that are for, low-income people, we could probably provide, we could almost put them, we could pay whatever the difference between the market rate is in that private lodge and, whatever the subsidized rate is that the low-income person would be paying anyways in the public lodge. Could we be doing that for less money is what I'm wondering. And do you have any information on that?
I asked Derek that question a year ago, and there's no money in lodges. We've built our perform at 1%. No investor's going to come build a lodge for 1% profit. And to get them grants, you have to be so much under market rate. You're having a hard time people building rooms for market rate for rent. There's a shortage in Strathmore, especially one bedrooms.
So like, there's obviously like, there's a demand, right? And
High demand, but there's no rooms.
So that's because the demand
Market is
can't spend the necessary money for the private lodge, is what you're saying.
No, I'm saying the demand is greater than the supply of rooms in Strathmore.
Right, I get that, but like, so if you guys weren't entertaining the idea of building a lodge, would there be a private builder that would, and you're saying like not for 1%, and I get that, but if they are able to charge, but that's because you guys are limited to, you said 90%, you can charge up to 90% of market rates, and you're charging, around 60 at the lowest. So, if a business could come in and actually charge market rates, would they? And it sounds like there's quite a demand, so that's where I'm saying, like, I'm kind of wondering.
So to charge market rates, you won't get any grants.
Right.
You'll not get AHPP or CMHC funding.
So you just, so what you're saying, Councillor Kester, is that you're just excluding that group that needs to access LAP. And so that's the issue. And the formulae that is set out for congregate living that we look at, it is a balanced process that allows for attainable housing.
Yeah, so, and also through the CMHC grant, we're only paying 3.3% interest. What would private entrepreneur want?
Sorry, Councillor Kester again. Wouldn't it stand to reason that if someone had a for-profit lodge, if it suddenly magically appeared, they had a for-profit lodge dealing with the same care that our current lodge has, the rents would have to be far greater for the owner of that building, the people running it, to have the profit they want. So a lodge like ours is far more affordable for people who need that care as they get into their golden years, compared to a for-profit place. Like even entering into a comparison with Sagewood is muddying the water because they're for-profit. Same with the new one that's potentially coming here. It's a for-profit facility with higher care servicing.
Yeah, that's apples and oranges.
Yeah.
They're different, totally different.
And I know if I had a choice, if I had to go to a lodge tomorrow that was for-profit versus one run by Wheatland Housing Management Board, I know which one I would choose. And I know which one my family would choose.
But there are limitations to going to the lodge. We can't offer that much care. So currently, half of the residents get home care, but home care is only 8 hours a day. And if you need 24-hour home care, I'm sorry, we can't provide that.
Does that answer your question, Councillor Montgomery?
Well,
About
yeah,
for-profits?
just so you know where I'm coming from. I'm coming from a perspective of wanting to provide housing to those who need it and can't afford it, and the people that need it or want it and can't afford it, that's where I'm kind of, and so that's why in my mind I'm saying, well, the people that want it or need it and can't afford it, they'd be paying the full market rate in this private lodge. And then between like the property taxes that we'd be collecting plus whatever requisition we're not paying, that could be, I mean, just based on these numbers, that I'm kind of pulling out of thin air, 500 or 600,000 a year. So it's like, could we take that 600,000 and and subsidize to the same extent the people? And so that's what I'm concerned. That's what my concerns are. I want to do things in the most efficient way, but as well, like with in mind that there are people that can't afford private care, obviously, or that kind of option. So I'm just trying to, I guess, what I'm doing is I'm trying to get down in my mind, and for the public as well, I just want to get down to, what is the best option? And so that's, that's why I appreciate your time right now, because you're providing information.
So if you want that answer, I would suggest phone Prince of Peace up and ask them how much it costs to move in there.
Do you know roughly how much it is?
I know roughly, but I can't say.
Well, and I think Councillor Montgomery's, he makes a really valid point in terms of, it's that age-old understanding of private for-profit versus a congregate living environment that we're looking at here. And when you have a private for-profit, it has a place in this community. We welcome it and we need it, and we have the capacity in a growing community where it's really critical that we have them. But we also need that other side. And so in a congregate living process like the one that we're undertaking with the lodge, having those multiple layers of living like we do with Wheatland Lodge allows you to make sure that you have attainable housing, affordable attainable housing. And so in the for-profit model, there has to be a payoff to investors. And as Councillor Kester said, nobody comes into that environment. It's why Strathmore struggles to get people to build affordable housing, because no builder is going to build for 1 or 2% profit. And so when you have for-profit environments, they come in with that understanding that at the front end, they'll load it with opportunities to fill their environments with people that are under subsidy. But over time, they eliminate that. So a really good example of that would have been Silvera that we just saw in Calgary that raised their rents, I think it was 175%, because they no longer had to meet that threshold. And as a for-profit private environment, they have an obligation to their shareholders. And so then there's no more affordable housing for that whole group. What the Alberta government's facing right now, with what they've, with what Minister Nixon just did some pretty admirable movements in terms of people being moved into motels and moved out of motels and out of hospitals into overnight shelters. He's put a stop to that, a very abrupt stop to it, but it comes from that total lack of access to attainable housing. And so this is what we want to do for our community. When Derek Weiss stood here the first time in that first presentation, he talked about the numbers in our community who need access to attainable housing. And he talked about what that projection looks like to 2045. And it's significant. And so we know that we need all of those things you talked about. We need the for-profit model in our community just for people to have access. And we need the attainable housing process for people to have access. So by doing the program like we have sitting in front of us, it has proven itself over time to be an affordable, useful way of ensuring that you have a safety net for all community.
If I could go back to Councillor Montgomery, did you get your answer to the question you asked about property taxes? I don't believe the current lodge pays property taxes. So is your question that if you had a for-profit lodge, people could pay the amount, and then if we took in their property taxes, we could somehow subsidize or rebate people who are living in a for-profit lodge? Isn't that a bit more unwieldy than just?
I would put it this way, so with the current lodge model proposed and then what the current lodge is, the town pays money to the lodge to house people. But if you look at say a private model, the private model would be where the company is, responsible for their own capital financing, obviously, and everything, all their costs and everything. And on top of that, they potentially, as they do now, could pay hundreds of thousands of dollars in property taxes. So, I'm looking at there's kind of a swing basically between what the town could be paying in requisitions and what the town could be collecting in property taxes. And that amount to me is anything less than that kind of net amount, that if we could house the same number of people for the same cost, for less than that net amount, then we're coming out ahead, I guess is how it works in my mind.
I think the for-profit model, does something else. And one of the things that, we always talk about as people who sit, as representatives of municipal governments is that there is only one taxpayer. And so, it's a misnomer to think that a for-profit coming into our community is not getting government funding, because for-profits that have L3D and L4D, which this council's very familiar with, and proposing a hospice, they're getting paid for that, extremely well paid, out of taxpayer funding, and it forms a part of their profit model. So it's all tax funded.
I guess if I could come back, have you gotten the answer you were looking for, Councillor Montgomery, from Councillor Kester regarding the for-profit and property taxes versus the current lodge?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think
And then just before we go on to your next question, Claudette, I just want to double check with you. I believe Councillor Wiley has left the meeting. I don't know what's happened, but he has left the meeting as of 7:06 p.m.
That's
And again,
correct.
oh, he notified you guys as well?
I seen him drop off.
Okay, I don't know what has happened, why he's left, but he has left.
Thank you.
Okay. Just one more comment, and then I can sit down. Not too much thought's been put into it. If you build a new lodge for 120 beds, how many suites in Strathmore will be opened up for accommodations for different people? I don't know how many. Well, that's time will tell, but there'll be a significant number, because a lot of those seniors are spending 40-50%, we've been told, on rent of their income. It's unattainable for them. So thanks for the opportunity, and hope that answers your questions.
Do you have further questions, Councillor Montgomery?
Yeah, you know what, actually, I think most of, actually, my questions have been answered. Thank you very much, Councillor Kester. Your information was very helpful and valuable. I do appreciate you answering my questions, and please pardon me for not wanting to get it straight from the horse's mouth earlier. Yeah, no, I love the hospice project. I've personally donated to it myself because I do believe in what they're doing. I think I've got a bit of a pretty good idea of how that part's going to function. Yeah, and you know what? My questions or my hang-ups, let's say, are numbers based. Councillor Kester, I need to see, the number at the bottom, to know where where things are, supposed to be, at least projected to be at. And I think that that's been clarified. And so I am satisfied now. So thank you.
Thank you. And I'm really glad that this council was allowed to have a very knowledgeable person like you, County Councillor Kester, to actually answer questions for us. And I appreciate the answers from Councillor Peterson and Councillor Wagoner as well. Councillor Wagoner.
I'm ready.
Sorry, just before I do that, Councillor Langmaid, you've been at home. I haven't seen a hand up. Do you have any questions?
I have no questions, Your Worship. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wagoner.
I'm ready for a motion.
Okay.
I move that council authorize a payment of $463,389 for design work for Wheatland Housing Management Body's proposed 120-unit Wheatland Lodge to advance the project to shovel-ready status for application to provincial granting program with funds coming from the Financial Stabilization Fund, and that the design work payment is contingent on all Wheatland Housing Management Body funding partners also authorizing payment for their proportionate share of the design work.
Thank you. And just before I call for any discussion or comments, I just wanted to point out to the people at home that, once again, Councillor Wiley has left the meeting and Councillor Mitzner could not be here due to a family crisis. So we do not have a full house of councillors here. Are there some discussion points, or are there any comments from any councillors concerning the motion on the floor?
Yeah, I just have one question, actually, and Councillor Kester, if you want to answer this, you can, but it's, my question is, I guess, how will all of these numbers be affected if the provincial grant didn't come through?
Provincial grant don't come through, we can pony up more as municipalities. I'm thinking it's around $13 million. There's nothing stopping the municipalities or private individuals donating to the cause. When we get the required number, we can still go to CMHC and borrow that money. But we would have to come up with that in turn to gain what CMHC requires for equity. And I don't know what that is. I'm just hoping that the Alberta government comes through. And hence, that's the board's concern too. It's been characterized as a beauty contest, which is the prettiest application to get funding. So if we got our shovel ready to go, everybody's happy and everybody's in agreement, the community's happy, we got a beautiful site of land to put it on, we're ready to go, we're gonna look pretty sharp, right? So yeah, dress it up nice and we'll get the money.
Thank you, Councillor Kester.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Councillor Wagoner.
Councillor Kester, before you sit down, sorry, could you maybe explain the ramifications of what could happen if we do not proceed to the shovel-ready status? Again, I've been told, I'm under the understanding that any monies that we have invested into this, there's a potential that it could be gone due to the backloading of our consultants. So could you maybe speak to that, since we are kind of talking about financials?
Okay, I'll answer the last question first. In our contracts with our consultants, a lot of them have backloaded their fees, so they're not charging the full amount, and they'll get it when the project's done. The contractors can be released at any time, and we only owe for work done. We don't have to pay any backloading. Okay, so these contractors we have a vested interest to keep us going and do their best work and win the competition. And When a minister makes an announcement in front of 500 elected officials, I tend to believe and take him at their word. So if he's only going to fund shovel-ready projects, and they've only put away money for the next 3 years, after that, I don't know if there'll be any money coming. We're not shovel-ready, we won't advance, if you take him at his word. I've been on the lodge board for longer than Councillor Peterson, and there was a time the government paid for the whole lodge. You give them a piece of land, they put it up. And then a change in government come and we wiggled around, they would still put it up, but they wanted ownership. We didn't get any of that money. And now this government's here and it's taken them this long to come up with this program. So a lot of drive for this program is the crisis of our healthcare in the province. Our hospitals are full, it's costing a pile of money, and there are a lot of, I forget the term, critical ill people in the hospital, but they're stable. They could be taken care of in facilities such as Sagewood for half the price as a hospital charges. The Alberta government's on a move to you have to die not in a hospital. You have to die at home, whatever your home is, if it's the lodge, if it's Sagewood, or it's another private care facility. They do not want people staying in the hospital to end a life. You go in there because you're ill, you get better, stabilized, and then hence this is the problem they run down in Lethbridge and the motels and stuff. That's what the push is to
Your Worship,
justify our
sorry,
money, right, yeah.
Well, and one thing relevant to Councillor Wagner's question, you know, that we should never forget, and that is that the hospice pays 10% of everything that has come forward into this process. They've been an amazing partner. They've been an amazing partner to the point that they actually tried to fund this 1.4 million. But because of their nonprofit status, it's not a doable undertaking. But the very fact that they'd try shows the confidence that this group has in moving forward. And that's you know, that's out of their 4.1 million that has been raised by this broader community in this hospice. So the faith that this group has, especially regarding the latest announcements, it's extremely hopeful. And that's why I am so much more hopeful and so in favor of this, of Councillor Wagner's motion. And I also think that we shouldn't forget the fact that 62 years ago, you know, it was sort of like, it's like we are now, there was no money. This community had to come together to put this lodge together, and they own it now. They've owned it for several years, and so they do have a $9 million asset as well. And we shouldn't forget that when we go forward. And it might be an option for what Councillor Wagner was referencing into the future. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Peterson. I'll echo some of your comments. Town of Strathmore has always demonstrated this from the start of this project that we believe in and support the new lodge concept. We've been very appreciative of Wheatland Housing Management Board and its members for all the work they've done, especially Councillor Kester, who has worked tirelessly on this. It's been a passion project and something he believes in and has a great deal of knowledge and experience in trying to help come to fruition. Wheatland County should be very proud to have you as a councillor, and I appreciate your knowledge and expertise today. Also want to thank Terry and Dr. McNeely, who are here from the Hospice Society. I'm fully in support of the motion. As everyone knows in Strathmore, I believe our seniors need to be looked after, and for-profit facilities are not something that are necessarily the best thing for our people, and we need to look after them in their golden years. So I want to thank you all for all your hard work. I will be voting in favor of this motion. And Councillor Kester, did you have final comments?
Just so everyone hears, I should have thanked the town of Strathmore at the very outset of my comments, town of Strathmore has always been very supportive. We ask them for something, they're there to help. The parade day comes to mind, using this facility here for our special meetings. Yeah, thanks so much.
You're welcome. Councillor Langmaid, sorry, Deputy Mayor Langmaid. It's been a while.
Thank, thank you very much, Your Worship. Just a quick comment on my end before we go to the vote here. You know, in large projects like this, there's a lot of unknowns, and there's no one person that's part of the project that has every answer, and that's okay, because it's really the team that matters, and it's the team that's brought together to deliver the project that really makes the difference for me. You know, and I know that the Wheatland Housing Management Body team has recently undergone a governance review that didn't identify any significant concerns, and I've been very pleased with the communication I've received from the Wheatland Housing Management Body board members that have been appointed by this council. So thank you very much, Councillors Peterson and Wagner, for answering all of my questions over the last 2 years when they've come up. I appreciate the diligence you've had in answering them. It's council's job in the end to consider the priorities that we've all agreed on and aligned in our strategic plan, and that we ensure good governance for the people of Strathmore. It's not, I don't believe that it is the role of council to micromanage each project and understand every single detail. There's just too much going on. That's too much to ask of a regular human being. The money we put forward today is going towards the preparation of a Class A budget, which is going to help us, you know, nail in those costs a little more and a little closer as we move forward. And that's going to help us understand current and potential future impacts. But I think investing in this project now in 2024 dollars, not what could be $2045 down the road, but investing now in 2024 dollars is guaranteeing us affordable seniors living for the next 40 to 50 years. And for a relatively small cash infusion, that's a really huge benefit that our residents and our seniors are going to reap. And that's something that's really important to me. So I will be supporting this evening, not because I have every answer. I don't, and I never will, but because I have extreme faith in the team that has been delivering this project, and because I do strongly believe that it's in the best interest of our community and our community members. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Langmaid. Any comments before? Oh, Councillor Wegener?
I would just, again, I'll be supporting this, but again, I would also like to see a recorded vote for tonight's vote, please.
Thank you. So are there any further discussion points tonight?
I just want to thank the people who came here tonight as you did, because they are sacrificing their own meeting tonight to be here, to answer our questions, and to lend their capabilities to our greater public. I really appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Thank you for that. So if there are no further comments, I'll call the question. All in favor?
I did.
Richard did. All in favor? I can't see past Richard. Unanimous. Oh, okay. Thank you very much. The motion has passed, and I thank you all for being here. And at this time, there's nothing left for me to do but adjourn the meeting at 7:31. I got caught in a time warp. And the meeting is adjourned. Oh, that felt good.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, Deputy Mayor.